Got some shocking news for you all today. Charles Oliveira, nearly scammed by a fan, the man who's made a name for himself with his jaw-dropping, all-out fighting style and insane ability to finish his opponents. We're talking about the guy with the UFC records for most finishes and fight night bonuses, a true savage in the octagon. But hey, if you're somehow not already a fan of Du Bronx, you're gonna want to hear this wild story. Now, here's the scoop. Recently, the former UFC lightweight champ, Charles Oliveira, sat down with Ali Mack from Full Violence. During the chat, Oliveira was hit with some tough questions, but things took a wild turn when he opened up about a fan scam that almost got him. Apparently, a fan slid into his DMs claiming to be struggling with setbacks and needing help with rent. Oliveira, being the good guy that he is, almost felt sorry for the person and was ready to help. But something didn't sit right. The amount of money they were asking for just didn't add up for someone who was supposedly desperate. The guy asked me for $10,000 and I was like, damn, bro, I live at a really nice place and I don't pay this, you know? The charismatic fighter also added this before laughing, I live in a good area. We don't have a bill that spends this money. It's a crazy story for sure, not only because Oliveira was initially willing to help, but because the person clearly didn't do their research. Scams aside, it's still up in the air who Oliveira will face next in the octagon. At UFC 309 last month, he took down Michael Chandler for the second time, keeping his hopes for a title shot alive. Right now, Du Bronx sits at number 2 in the UFC lightweight rankings. Who do you think the former champion should battle next? The number 1 ranked Arman Tsarukyan, who edged out Oliveira by split decision in August, is set to challenge champion Islam Makhachev in early 2025. Up next, Jon Jones may not be the best heavyweight. After his unforgettable victory over Stipe Miocic last month, there are definitely fewer people questioning whether Bones is the GOAT. It's safe to say there's less debate about him being the best pound-for-pound fighter in the game right now, though some still argue. But has Jones truly proven he's the best heavyweight on the planet? Dan Hardy doesn't think so. Jones took on the legendary heavyweight at UFC 309 and ended Miocic's night with a spinning back kick to the body followed by some brutal follow-up shots. Although Miocic's prime was clearly behind him and he retired afterward, Jones was still flooded with praise for his performance. As the MMA world eagerly waits to see if Jones will face interim champion Tom Aspinall, Hardy spoke with MMA Fighting. When discussing Jones and who holds the title of best heavyweight on the planet, the Outlaw had this to say. I think Jon Jones is the pound-for-pound best. I think he's the best representation of mixed martial arts generally that we've ever seen. I think he's still evolving, which is terrifying, but is he the best current heavyweight on the planet? I don't think so. I think the winner of Aspinall versus Ngannou would be the answer. It's speed versus power, and I don't know if Ngannou would want to wrestle because Aspinall has a fantastic ground game. That really is the question. No disrespect in any way to Jon. He's the current heavyweight champion, but he's not the current best heavyweight on the planet. Certainly not. Hardy's comments are sure to turn some heads, but he's not the only one who thinks Aspinall could be the better fighter than Jones at heavyweight. The same argument could be made for Ngannou in terms of how he matches up with Bones. That said, it's looking like we won't see Aspinall versus Ngannou or Jones versus Ngannou. At least not unless there's a huge shakeup in the MMA promotional world. But what do you think? Do you agree with Dan Hardy? Would a fight between Aspinall and Ngannou really decide who's the baddest heavyweight on the planet right now? Aljamain Sterling has finally broken his silence on the fight delay. He and Merab Dvalishvili are set to clash at UFC 310 next weekend. But recently, Aljo opened up about why he stuck to his decision and refused to fight Evloev sooner. For months, Sterling and Evloev traded verbal blows online about a potential matchup, with the fight initially targeted for UFC 307 back in October. In the end, however, the bout was moved to UFC 310 this December. In a recent video Sterling posted, he explained why he chose to avoid fighting Evloev in early fall.
I asked for, ironically, an extra month because Mozart was trying to push me to come back sooner than I wanted to, and I told him, I'm not going to do that again. I learned my lesson from the last fight, which was my loss to O'Malley, and I told myself I'll never let somebody push me into a corner over money again. So at the end of the day, I've accomplished what I need to accomplish. So now when I compete, it's on my terms. It's when I feel like coming back, and it's when I feel good, mentally good, because you have to want to be in there to compete. If not, the octagon is a dangerous place to be unsure if you really want to be in there.
In case you need a refresher, right after the UFC announced that Sterling would face O'Malley at UFC 292, Sterling rejected the fight, citing ongoing injuries. He did, however, end up fighting and losing to O'Malley at the event, but Sterling repeatedly stated that he was pressured into taking the fight after footage from the series Fight Inc. Inside the UFC was released, showing UFC Chief Business Officer Hunter Campbell urging him to accept the bout. The question of whether Sterling returned too soon flared up again after that. So, do you think Sterling made the right call by postponing headlining the Loya fight? And do you think Aljo has what it takes to pull off an upset win? Next up, Leon Edwards has revealed the date for his next UFC fight. It's been a while since we saw Edwards in the octagon, especially after he lost the welterweight title to Bilal Muhammad last July. But it looks like Rocky will be back before Q1 of 2025 wraps up, as Ariel Helwani recently reported. Edwards confirmed to DAZN Boxing that he's set to headline the UFC's upcoming card in London, England. Leon Edwards was recently interviewed on the DAZN Boxing broadcast by Jamie Ward, where he revealed he'll be headlining the O2 card in London on March 22nd, 2025. He didn't drop any hints about his opponent, though. Unsurprisingly, the news quickly sparked reactions online, with fans speculating who the former champion might face next. JDM or Brady seems like a logical matchup. The UFC really dropped the ball here. It should have been Paddy versus Moano headlining this card. Now that's a fight that deserves 5 rounds. But who's Leon going to fight? Could it be Leon versus JDM? Honestly, that could be a snooze fest. 5 rounds of light strikes. If the other top contenders turn it down, they might have to give it to Leon. I'm sure he'd accept. It's going to be a battle, and since Edwards has already faced Kamaru Usman 3 times, and with Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Gary fighting next weekend, Sean Brady or Jack Della Maddalena seems like the most logical choice. Both are tied for 4th in the UFC's welterweight rankings right now. Of course, many fans would love to see Edwards and Jorge Masvidal finally square off in the octagon, especially given their infamous 3-piece and a soda incident back in 2019. But a lot has changed since then, including Gamebred's retirement from MMA in 2023. Masvidal has since announced his desire to return to the UFC, but he hasn't competed and isn't ranked in the top 15. So, if the UFC wants to focus on title shot implications, JDM or Brady would likely get the call instead. Now, let's take a look at Alexandre Pantoja discussing his training for Kai Asakura. For many casual or UFC-only fans, Asakura might be a new face. But ahead of his showdown with the Japanese fighter, Pantoja has been training with someone who knows Asakura very, very well. Asakura is set to fight the flyweight champion at UFC 310 next weekend, marking his octagon debut. His opportunity comes, in part, because Pantoja has already defeated many of the UFC's top flyweights, but also because Asakura has long been recognized as one of Japan's top fighters. He was Rizin's bantamweight champion for years. One man who fought Asakura during his Rizin days, not just once, but twice, was Kyoji Horiguchi. Asakura brutally knocked out Horiguchi in the first round back in 2019, but in their 2020 rematch, Horiguchi turned the tables and ended Asakura's reign as bantamweight champion. Now, it turns out that Pantoja has been training with Horiguchi to prepare for UFC 310. During the countdown episode for the December 7th card, Pantoja shared his thoughts on the former UFC title challenger. Kyoji is one of the best partners that I've had in my whole life. I learn a lot, he's a samurai, an amazing guy, and it's an amazing opportunity to train with him. I've seen Kai fight Kai 2 times, and in one of them, he won. He beat Horiguchi. That, for me, someone who can beat Kyoji, this guy is gonna have a lot of power. But in their next fight, Kyoji, that guy. That's some serious praise for Horiguchi, who still holds Rizin's flyweight title. Speaking of the countdown show, the episode also dives into Asakura's fascinating rise to combat sports fame in Japan. Kai's older brother, Mikuru, was a feared street fighter who eventually transitioned into professional fighting. Many of his street fights were filmed, as he often ran out of opponents. It was during one of these fights that Mikuru invited Kai to join in, and that's when Kai realized he had a natural gift for fighting. Their scrap was also captured on film, and all of this is featured in the countdown episode. With all that said, do you think Asakura can take the flyweight title from the legendary Brazilian fighter at UFC 310? And if Pantoja manages to retain his belt, what's next for the champion? Recently, MMA Junkie reported that if Sean O'Malley had stayed the bantamweight champ, Pantoja was eyeing a move up to 135 to challenge Sugar. The two have been exchanging verbal shots ever since their sparring session, and the debate over who truly won it. While a fight with O'Malley now seems off the table, could Pantoja still consider moving up? Ciryl Gane reflects on his fight with Jon Jones. After Gane's loss to Jones, many fans and analysts were quick to criticize his performance, with some even claiming that the former interim champ was too one-dimensional. However, Gane insists that the fighter who faced Jones at UFC 285 wasn't the real Gane. As you probably remember, Jones wasted no time, taking Gane down in just over 2 minutes and submitting him with a choke. It was a dominant performance from Jones, who was making his heavyweight debut. For many, the fight ended up being a major letdown. Fast forward to now, and Ciryl Gane is gearing up to face Alexander Volkov at UFC 310. This will be Gane's second fight since his loss to Jon Jones, following his dominant win over Sergey Spivak last September. In the countdown show recently released for UFC 310, 2010, Gane opened up about his shocking loss to Jones. He shared, "When I look back at it, it's clear that I wasn't there. I didn't recognize myself in that fight. It's something I've never done before. I lack my usual distance management, my movement, and the sharpness I love to show. I had none of that. In hindsight, I believe this experience has been good for me. It helped me refocus, and it gave me a spirit of revenge, a competitive fire." This is going to be a wild reaction from the MMA community. Is Gane basically admitting he totally choked against Jones? No. Seriously. No pun intended. And do you think he'll ever get another shot at the heavyweight title again? The MMA world can't stop speculating about who Jon Jones will face next. Fans have been begging for a Jones versus Tom Aspinall fight for months, but Jones keeps shooting it down, insisting it's not a necessary match and instead hinting at a showdown with Alex Pereira. Recently, Gane's coach Lopez threw his 2 cents into the mix during a chat with Inside Fighting, and here's what he had to say. Why push for Jon Jones to fight Tom Aspinall? First off, Aspinall is dangerous. Second, he's not going to add anything significant to Jon's legacy. But then you have Pereira, who's done it all. Glory champion, UFC double champ. Why not face him instead? He's a bigger pay-per-view draw too. Think about it. Now, some might say that beating Pereira wouldn't do much for Jon's legacy either. After all, Pereira hasn't fought in the heavyweight division and has only been in MMA for a few years. But what's your take on this? Do you think Jon will still avoid fighting Aspinall, even if the UFC offers him a ridiculous amount of money to make it happen? Khamzat Chimaev just sent a bold message to Dricus Du Plessis about a potential title fight. He posted a picture of the president on Twitter, tagging Dricus with eyeball emojis. Looks like Khamzat is either planning to fight in the USA for the middleweight title, or he's about to have someone ask the president for a visa. This comes just days after DDP told his camp and sparring partners to grow beards and shout, "I kill everybody" during sparring, sparking even more rumors that a Khamzat vs. Dricus showdown is on the horizon. Do you think the president will actually give Khamzat a visa to fight? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Here's what the MMA community is saying about all of this. It's the fight to make in my opinion. He leapfrogged Strickland after his finish over Rob. Strickland's performance over Costa was boring and doesn't warrant a rematch. Khamzat did something nobody has done in the UFC, which is submit Rob. It's a fresh, exciting matchup. Unlike Sean versus DDP2, picking up losers now, huh? If this fight happens, it's just another easy win for Chimaev. Oh man, Sean Strickland, get ready, buddy. You're fighting Kyo Balo in the Apex. Cry son of a Strickland. No one cares about you. You're in an era of more Robs. We needed a champion like DDP who's willing to take the hard fights when he could easily take an easier option. Strickland's gonna need a Theo Von session after this.